Welcome to this video, friends. In this one, I'm going to show you how to construct inner joins, and these allow us to join two tables. So before we get to anything technical, let's just take a look at the concept here. What is the concept? Well, on the left side, we have a table, and we have some columns, ID, name, column 3, column 4, and then the order ID. On the right side, we have table 2, and again, we have an order ID, then an item name, some number of items bought, some price, some column 5. It doesn't matter. And keep in mind that even though I'm using very small tables, it doesn't matter whether you have a table with 50 fields and another one with 100 fields, and one has 100,000 records, the other one has 1,000,000 records. The same logic applies. Keep that in mind, okay? When we do an inner join, we look through these carefully. Well, obviously it's been programmed to do that. And you join them as follows. When you look at these two, right, you see there's an order ID column in the table 1. There's an order ID column in table 2. So when I look at the values, I see that this 1 clearly can be matched with that 1, and the 2 can be matched with that 2, but the 3 cannot be matched with the 4. So when we do an inner join, we use a field like the order ID, for example here, one field, and then we use that to join the tables only where the order ID value in this case is the same, or whatever the field name happens to be. See? It doesn't have to be order ID, obviously. It could be many different things. So then when you look down below, I have a little picture below those two. So you've got the ID now. And when I look at the order ID column, notice it's shown only one time. When I look through it, you see that the 1 overlaps, the 2 overlaps, but the 3 and the 4 obviously don't overlap. That means this last record here would not be taken, would not be put into the join. So in other words, we end up with this. Choose only records that exist in both tables, according to the order ID number. And keep in mind that once you have this, it's just another table. So once you take one table and another one and you join with an inner join, after that, it just becomes another table, and you can do everything to it that pretty much you've done until now. Order it, group it, and so on. So remember the big idea here, right? Because the order ID values are shared between these two tables, that record from the left and from the right becomes one record in the joint table, so to speak. Again, for the second record, because the order ID is shared between the tables, those two records become one record, so to speak. And lastly, remember, the 3 and the 4 have different order IDs. Those records are rejected from the join. That's it. And keep in mind, this applies even if you have huge tables. All right, so let's go and take a look at an example of actually doing this. Let me go into SSMS here. Well, first of all, we need some data. So to shorten that process, I'm going to show you a practical skill of importing data into SQL. So right-click on my DBase, and in your case, you got to get the files and download them from Lesson Resources. They're Excel files. So I'm going to go to my DBase, and then I'm going to go over here to Tasks, and then down to Import Data. I'm going to import 2 files pretty quickly. All right, from the provider here, select Excel. So make sure you have Excel selected. Then I click Browse, and I navigate to the folder where I have my data. I've got 2 here, so I'm going to choose Customers first, and then click Open. The Excel version is just recognized as 2007. That's fine. Click Next. From the next stage, make sure that over here, to avoid errors, scroll down and select SQL Server Native Client 11.0. From here, you're going to have to stick in your server name, so computer name / SQL Express. And then down below, once you've done that and it's recognized, again, I'm using Windows authentication, so it's very easy. And the database is my DBase, the one we've been using. And I click Next. Copy data from one or more tables, correct. Click Next. At this stage, edit the mappings. Let's take a look at what I mean by mappings. So notice that when you bring this in, this ID here is recognized as some kind of float data type. We don't want that. We just want it to be an integer. The customer name is recognized as nvarchar. That's good. And the order ID should also be recognized as an integer. So these are the mappings. You're mapping between the source and the destination. You want to make sure the data types are correctly recognized between Excel and SQL Server here. Click OK, click Next, click Next, click Next, click Finish, let this run. Make sure you see a message similar to this one, 2 rows transferred. All right, and close that. So this is one table. Let's do the next one. So right click on my DBase. Right again, tasks, import data. You should pause the video, try it with the other table before I show you. Just as an exercise, it's useful one time. But I'll just continue. All right, so again, Excel, browse, get the orders one, click next. Make sure over here select SQL Server Client. All of this you got to configure here, remember? Click next. Copy data, yes, click next. Edit the mappings. And notice now here again with the order ID, you want to make sure you switch that over to an integer. You can leave the nullable, for our purposes it's fine. But the quantity, again, make sure you switch that to an integer. It's like a quantity of clothing. You wouldn't have 2.5 blouses. You see, it doesn't make sense. So you want an integer, a whole number data type, like 3 or 4. And for the total, make that one money. And then click OK. So again, pause the video if you have to, friends, right? And then make sure your settings match. And then click Next, click Next, click Finish, Finish. And again, make sure at the end you see something like 3 rows transferred and close. And now we can do our join. So let's take a look. First of all, I'm just going to select everything. So I'm going to say select, say star from customers, and make sure you put the dollar symbol at the end. Yeah, that's how they're named by default with a dollar symbol. All right. Execute that. You've got it. You see? Good. Next. Select star from, and then orders with the dollar symbol at the end. Execute that. Good. Looks good. And obviously the order ID is a field that exists in both tables. That means we can match them on it. Take a look. Okay, but before I show you that, I want to show you something else that will be useful. When you have multiple select statements like this is what you can do. Select both, and then just execute both. And down below, you're going to get 2 separate outputs. So one is for the customers table, and one is for the orders table. And this is useful because it reminds us that both of them have the order ID. And the order ID, therefore, can be matched between the tables using the inner join. And remember, the heart of it is pull out records that exist in exactly both tables. If the order ID doesn't exist in both, then that's discarded, it's not used. All right, let's do the join here. So I'm going to type select from, and first we'll take care of the bit that is the join. And I'm doing that one part first because that's how it actually operates. Theoretically speaking, that should run first. So I'm going to say customers with the dollar symbol. Then I will say inner join. So basic keywords here. Orders, like that. So this says you're joining, doing an inner join on customers and orders on those 2 tables. Next, you're going to type on. And after that, you specify the field that you will use for that purpose. And you can do that by typing the following. The name of your table, and then dot, and then the name of the field you're using for the join. We'll say order ID. And because you want to match that field between the 2 tables, type equals, and then orders dot order ID. And remember that this bit that I'm highlighting, this runs first. The join is computed first. It's done first. But after that, it essentially becomes like another table. So you can select fields from it. You can sort, group by. You can do all the usual stuff. So here, I'm going to make a list of some fields. First, I'm going to type the customer name. And now remember that the customer name is coming from the customers table, where we see Mary Smith and John Smith. That's all it is. Nothing too deep. Put a comma. Next, I'm going to try to select the order ID. Let's see what happens here. And notice it gets underlined red, so we hover our mouse over it and it says ambiguous column name order ID. Correct. It's ambiguous because it exists in both of the tables. So it doesn't know whether it should take it from this table or from the one below it. It could come from either one. So to remove the ambiguity, we can type the following. Customers dot order ID. So you put the name of the table, dot, and then the name of the field, and the ambiguity goes away. And we can add one more here, quantity. And the quantity, again, exists only in the orders table right there. You see that? So you don't have to do anything else with it. Its name can be found in the correct table because it exists in only one of them. I hope you've got that. And at this point, let's see. Let me just review quickly here. Make sure I haven't missed anything. Looks good. Looks good. Highlight and run. And we have the result of the join operating perfectly. We have John Smith, order ID 1. So we've connected his name to the fact that he bought 2 items. We've connected Mary's name to the fact that she bought 4 items, you see? And we've done that by using the order ID. Now, as before, keep in mind the following, that you can do stuff like this. So for example, order by quantity descending. That still applies. Everything that we've learned previously always applies. So select it and run it. And you've got the quantity now beginning at 4 in the output window and going down to 2. Okay, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much, friends, and I'll see you in the next one. Do remember that the Excel files are under lesson resources.